Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar, Can STEM be taught online? Brought to you by EdQuarter. My name's Janet Ash-Brown and I'm the editor of Education Technology. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll be discussing the lessons learned from the first half of 2020, in which the entire education sector was forced to adapt to the realities of a remote world. This webinar is brought to you in partnership with DigitalEd, an online learning company that offers digital education solutions designed especially for STEM-based courses. DigitalEd's mission is to transform online education and empower educators across the world to improve the learning experience for everyone involved. Here, we'll explore how two respected UK universities, Cardiff and Derby, were able to adjust to the transition online when education institutes were ordered to close in March this year, uncovering exactly what it takes to teach STEM programs successfully within a virtual environment. Viewers at home, please note that you can ask us questions in the chat box throughout the webinar, and later we'll open the floor to a Q&A with our wonderful guest panel. Speaking of whom, with me today are three experts in the education sector, including Dr. Cedric Berger, Senior Lecturer from Cardiff School of Biosciences, Dr. Ovidiu Bagdasar, Associate Professor of Mathematics at Derby University, and Louise Krmpotic, Vice President of Enterprise Services at DigitalEd. Hey guys, thank you for joining us all.
Hello.
Hello. So today our lovely guests are going to share best practice tips and advice for the effective delivery of STEM programs online, and discuss how lecturers can future-proof the classroom as we embrace an increasingly digital world. So panelists, if you're all happy to kick off, then we'll get the ball rolling. All good? Fantastic.
Yes.
So I'm going to start with a question for Cedric. Cedric, was the digital transition sparked by the pandemic already on the cards prior to the outbreak? And overall, how did Cardiff School of Biosciences handle the accelerated digital transition?
So good afternoon, everyone. So I think digital education was on the map in Cardiff University for quite a few years. And I think in 2018, the university invested quite a lot of money, I think 1.9 million in a new facility for e-learning and e-assessment, which allowed to have 165 students at the same time in a room to work on computer and have a new way of learning and teaching. So I think at the university, we look for a lot of different software, and we were already have this transition to more especially for assessment online. I think we have modules which have a big cohort between 200 to 300 students, and it was a lot easier for us to do assessment, or even I would say formative assessment for the student online than instead to do on paper. So in a way, when we went in the lockdown, everything was in place, not fully used, so it was quite fast for the transition. And we have also a lot of already all the lecture were recorded or online before that. So for us, it was not easy, but was not that complicated to went online.
Lovely. Thank you, Cedric. What about Derby? Ovidiu, over to you. Was the move already in the pipeline?
Yes, hello everyone. I think in our university we try to keep up to date with the IT infrastructure all the time. So I think we were maybe the first institution to have Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10 deployed across the site. So I think our infrastructure was very modern. We were using VLE, we are using Blackboard. We have been recording lectures, I recorded all my sessions using Panopto. We have a dedicated branch of the university focused on online delivery. And of course, we had access to all the relevant software for teaching and assessment. For STEM in particular, we have a dedicated building since 2017. And we had across the team significant experience with online assessment. We were planning to move much of the assessment for mathematics online because of the large cohorts and so on. But I think COVID gave us the push to make this happen. And now we really had to do it this time. And I think our university responded, the response to COVID was, so we moved everything online, but then we started to have lots of training sessions. delivered. We have a Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, so we have invested a lot in the training of staff to be able to cope with this transition to digital. I think the challenge to move fully online was still significant, especially when we had to keep the students on board. We had to look after the students, but this time remotely. We have used Blackboard Collaborate, and in my experience, I had to run lots of parallel sessions to manage large cohorts, and we had to use all the social interaction features within these platforms. So for example, in Blackboard Collaborate, I had a teaching assistant who was helping me to make the session as interactive as possible. So it's like clapping for the students, submitting good answers and so on. So it was a challenge, but yeah, I think we had everything needed to allow the transition.
Thanks, Ovidiu. I'm going to move over to Louise now. Louise, what does it take to deliver a course that would traditionally be taught face-to-face, so such as a STEM discipline, which requires a blend of both theory and lab-based work online? And it would be particularly interesting to know how the practical or lab-based sessions can be supported in this way.
Yeah, hello everyone. I think the key here is to use a flexible solution, right? A series of platforms that work well together, that provide the different features and functionality that are really needed. As Ovidiu mentioned, you have the collaboration piece that is really important. You have the lesson piece of being able to provide the information that people need. You have obviously being able to provide formative and summative assessments that students can interact with and can grade, and then can be graded automatically. So those are all key to sort of any types of disciplines. But when you think about STEM, it gets even a little bit more challenging, because you have specialized equations and formulas, and you have very complicated expressions that need to be graded, and you want them to be graded for math equivalency, not just, you know, did they put in the exact same answer that you had specified as the instructor. So those are additional things that you also need to make sure that you have a platform that can support those. And in terms of sort of practical and lab-based things, that's going to be a challenge, right? There are certain things that students are working on, need to be able to do physically, that we just can't do digitally and online. But what we can do are, we can sort of emulate those or simulate those. So provide simulations, interactive elements that students can experiment with, and then answer questions based on that. So that it's not the same, but at least you're providing them some of the same thinking that they need to, and understanding that they need to experience and show.
Thanks, Louise. Moving back over to Cedric. Cedric, what prompted Cardiff to decide that Mobius from DigitalEd would be the best solution for the job? And how exactly is it applicable to studies in the biosciences?
So I think like when we were exploring like what we can do for like digital learning, we wanted to have like an online platform. That means we don't need to install anything in the computer, which will be easy for access for the student, but also for the staff. In terms of the student point of view, it has to be easy to use. So it's, you know, if it's very complicated, the student will not go for, will like struggle to it. So it has to be really easy to use, and with no training and no specific training or like. So that was like for the student point of view. After that, for the staff or host point of view. So first, if you are doing online assessment, coursework, or formative assessment, one thing that you want to avoid is like any collision between the student. So what we wanted to be able is to have like for randomly generate data for each student. That means each of them will have to analyze something a bit different. And that Mobius can do that. You can also generate like random picture or diagram. So that's really helpful, because that means every student will have like some variation, and that's avoid this collision. We wanted to also to be able to generate automatic feedback. That means we don't have to do like manually one by one giving feedback. And when you have like a cohort of 270 students, that's really important, because otherwise it's really time consuming and it's not really a good use of your time. When you are doing also, I will say, more coursework or like assessment, you want to do also be like automatic grading, but you need also to do some automatic regrading, because I think like the students are very good, and that's a lesson of this year. to find answer you haven't thought about. And correct answer, but that means you need to be able to regrade 270 students very quickly without going manually to see why it was not correct. So it has to be fast. In terms of also for the staff, it has to be simple. You can't have like a software which is very complicated, because some are like very good with IT, but some staff are not as good. And it has to be simple. We can't lose time to learn for like, like a month or to create like a coursework. It's not really like feasible, especially with like the time limitation we had. We had like 3 months really to do everything. So that was not feasible. And also another like interesting point was for us to be able to see the student evaluation. So Mobius can give us a possibility to like look at the grading, what the student did well or what the student did not well, or what also was the most discriminative question. And that's really interesting, because if you are doing like formative assessment, it helps us to know what the student learn quite easily or where they are struggling, and then you can adapt your teaching and change or go back to like one specific point which was not very clear. Last thing also, we wanted to be, we are using Blackboard, and we wanted to be able to link like our platform with Blackboard, and Mobius is doing that.
Thanks, Cedric. Definitely sounds like a great solution. So here's one now for Louise. Louise, changing the mode of delivery from in-person to online has got to be quite a complex task. So can you tell us a little bit about what that process entails?
No, moving from sort of traditional to digital is definitely a challenge. I think that the key to doing it is to really the organization and clear expectations of what you want your course to deliver to your students. Looking at sort of what are some of the high priority things, making sure that you have all of those things online first, and then being able to move those online, then to follow that up with things like adding formative assessments, adding interactives. I think the key is really for people not to try to do everything at once. Right? When you have a limited amount of time, start, and then you can add to it, you can modify. And Mobius really allows people to do that and to build upon courses and continually improve them, as Cedric said, based on the feedback that you're getting from students, based on how you see students are doing, and if there are pieces that they're struggling with, or just as you develop your material yourself to then develop and expand your course.
Amazing, thank you, Louise. Definitely some really useful points there. So I've got a question here for both of our university reps now. Let's start with Ovidiu from Derby. Ovidiu, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've had to navigate since moving online in March? And can you tell us about some of the most impactful lessons you've learned during this time?
Yes, thank you very much. I think one of the biggest challenges, I think Louise and Cedric will agree, very tight deadlines. I felt that on the short term, like workloads nearly doubled for myself. So we had to move online, not only the teaching and then to adapt assessment, but then we also had to move all the activities online. For example, in our university, we have personal academic tutoring. So if every student has a personal academic tutor, and then we had like all the meetings had to take place online. Calendars were filling. Sometimes I had like 2 meetings in the morning I knew about, and then I ended up having 7 meetings. I think this was maybe the same for others. Then we found out that, so we had this tool with the Mobius, but for example, in my experience, my calculus exam had to be, was planned as a written exam at the end of the term. Now, we had some materials in Mobius, but not everything. So we had to develop from scratch to mimic the exam agreed, validated by the external examiner. So that took a bit more time than we were planning at the start. Then formative assessment was a very powerful tool, because having a mock exam available to the students 2 weeks before the actual exam really helped the students. They were able to practice. They were able to actually learn much better than they would have learned for the written exam. And also when I had to do the marking, so for example, if the system was not recognizing exactly the work done by the student, so I was able to go through through the script with a student using Teams. So I was sharing my screen, and then I was able to do the checking of the whole script and to explain it to the student within 5-10 minutes for each student. So it's like in 4 hours I finished all this feedback as well to the students. So I think this was really great, and I think this will be with me from now on. And I think as a lesson learned was that effective communication really makes a difference during these times, because in the past, our experience with many students was we were sending announcements through Blackboard, we were sending emails, and many students were saying, we don't read emails, sorry. And now we have a team. So we are using Teams to communicate as well effectively with the whole cohort of students in mathematics. So we had 100+ students, and then we were able to post messages, especially with this communication that was coming down from senior management about COVID regulations and so on. So we were able to keep all the students engaged through this platform. So I think this worked really well. And then in the end, we had 100% in the NSS, in the National Student Survey for Mathematics. So I think this confirmed that we were able to look after the students even remotely.
Fab, thank you so much, and great insights there, Ovidiu. Same question over to you, Cedric from Cardiff.
I agree with Ovidiu. I think like the time limitation of it was really firefighting in a way, especially at the beginning. Suddenly you have to deal with a lot of problems at the same time. I think again, like I agree also, like using a lot of different software or tools, online tools are helped a lot to keep the student, I would say, active and more integrated to the teaching, especially because suddenly we don't interact like physically with them. So we have to find another way to be able to interact with them online, but also in a time saving manner, because again, when you have like a large cohort, you can't be like do one-to-ones, that's not feasible. So like, yes, we are like using like, for example, a Mentimeter to have like when you have like a online lecture, like to allow like this interaction with the student. We are using the like Zoom, like here, where we have like a Q&A, and that's also working super well. I think like the student really like that. And what we learn, like I think like one of the biggest things is how flexible as a student. I think sometimes we are underestimating the student. I think students adapt easily and very quickly, probably a lot faster than we do. And I think we should never underestimate them and keep asking them what they are thinking. Like, so you are doing like a new things, like for example, we use Mobius, and asking them, did you like that? Or what was your feedback, is helping a lot to improve your assessment coursework or whatever you are doing. And I think like one of the things I will recommend is like, even if it's not perfect immediately, just do it. Just like, for example, if you are using Mobius, it doesn't matter if it's not the perfect coursework, it's not the perfect formative essay. It doesn't matter, because you can always improve it slowly, and you will have like a student feedback which will help you to improve it. And I think that's like one of the biggest lessons is there.
Thank you, Cedric. Okay, so final question now before we are going to hop over to an audience Q&A. This one's for the whole panel, but let's start with you, Ovidiu. Given the uncertainty ahead, what do you think lies in store for the 2020-21 academic year, and what advice would you offer your peers?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I will start with the title of this webinar, which is "Can STEM be taught online?" I would rephrase this, because now we don't have an option. So it's like we have to teach STEM online, and then we have to do it in the best way we can. I think we are solving an optimization problem with many constraints, but we have so there is uncertainty ahead, but there is also some certainty. So I'm certain that online delivery is here to stay. So at least using online assessment, even if you use it for formative purpose, as Cedric has mentioned before, and also Louise, so even if your assessment is not perfect, you can rely on your students to refine it, and even to make better, to improve it. So this is what I've done with calculus as well. So I made the formative assessment available 2 weeks before the exam, and then I was able to sort out most of the bugs with the students during this period. So I told them, look, this is what I was able to provide so far. This will help you learn the topics and then help me improve it. And we pride ourselves for working with the students, in partnership with the students. So I think, and the students really engage. I had a student who took the mock exam 29 times. And then he came with significant feedback. And I think this benefited everyone. So it benefited the students who engaged, who developed their skills, and also it benefits us because we can provide a better support to the students. I found that working with technology partners like DigitalEd saved a lot of time in developing materials. So such companies have to keep up to date with the technology. So now we have lots of requirements for accessibility, so lots of requirements, and the companies are keeping up to date with all these things, with GDPR and so on. So we didn't have to bother too much with all these things. So we are using Mobius bundles. So this is ready-made material, quality checked already. We tried in the past to develop our own contents, but then debugging was taking a lot of time. Now, because so I will have limited office time. So in terms of lessons learned and what advice would I give to colleagues? So office time will be limited. At the University of Derby, we are allowed to be on site for maximum 3 days. I will miss the office very much because I'm very well settled here. But I'll do my best to set up my own office as well, so to make sure that I have access to all the relevant technology. And my last point is that effective communication with students is key. So I would use something like Teams to communicate with the whole cohort, because now students are immersed into social media, and I think just sending announcements through Blackboard was not very effective. And overall, I feel that our students will get better support. So despite these challenges, I think our resources will be better than ever. Yes, so I'm quite positive about the future.
Thank you, Ovidiu. Cedric, how about you? Any advice you'd offer your peers?
No, I think I agree with Ovidiu. I think like we have to learn, teach more online, and they have to learn a lot more online than they were doing. Like I think online teaching or digital teaching was on like talk for at least 10 years, and we managed to do that now in 3 months. So I think like most of the staff, or like all the staff, adapt extremely quickly to the new situation. And the student, in a way, we are very happy with that. I think we have like some feedback from the student, which like I really appreciate that, to have like all these formative tests they can do after a lecture to learn, like to test their knowledge, and I think it's there to stay, and I think it's one of the strengths of any like digital platform like Mobius. I think what is also very interesting with Mobius for us is like you can keep the same assessment of like, or tweak it and improve it, and like year after year you can create like a very strong bank of like data that you can use for the student. So I think it's an investment. It's a bit time consuming at the beginning, but in the long term, we will save a lot of time by doing that. Using Blackboard, also the same thing. You can have your bank of question, and we are using Mentimeter also, which is really popular for the student because you can incorporate that in your PowerPoint. So the student, you can ask a question during your lecture, and the student can interact and comment on it. And I think that will work extremely well. And as I was saying before, my advice is that like we should trust the student. And I think like try things, like if it's not perfect, don't worry. It will work like later on, and you will improve it. And like a student will not blame you for trying to do new things. I think they will be quite exciting to say like, oh, that's the first time I used Mentimeter, it was fun, or no, I didn't really like that. It's fine. Then you know, and you can change it.
Thanks, Cedric. What about you, Louise? What about from the perspective of DigitalEd?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is really for everyone to be adaptable, right? We have to be and resilient. We have to be ready to move things one way or the other. And I think, you know, we've been pushed to move things online in the past 6 months, you know, and really it was pushing people ahead of time before they were really ready. But I think now with schools trying to do sort of a mixture, a blended here. Some people are online, some people are in person. I think it's a matter of making sure that you have the tools and the structure that you need to support that, and to be able to deliver that without really increasing the instructor's tasks even more. So a tool like Mobius can be used in the classroom, can be used for online, and it really just allows a more consistent learning for both cohorts of students.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Louise. So we're going to move over to a Q&A now, and we've actually had quite a few questions sent through prior to the broadcast. So we'll start off with this one here. So one viewer said, one concern I have been hearing from educators is the lack of resources available with rural and semi-urban areas for carrying out experiments that are a necessary part of STEM. So what could be possible ways to handle these issues?
Well, I maybe like be able to. I think like you will never be able to replace, I would say, outdoor experiment by digital education. What you can teach with digital education is more like the concept of the experiment, or like thinking how to build the experiment. But they will still have like some point to do like this type of training. I think we will never be able to fully replace like a STEM course online. We still need to have like some part of like physical work. I think like at Cardiff University, I think for the coming years, we still have like for like field course for like all the some of the part of the modules. And I think that will like it's small group 25 and outdoor we can do that. And like I would say, resource availability is a problem. Any part, not in rural or suburban. I think like in Cardiff, we still like some like not all the family have like internet, or like not all of them have like a way to access to like a computer or tablet or phone or mobile phone. So it is a problem, and that's something we need to take in consideration all the time.
Thanks, Cedric. Anything to add to that, Louise or Ovidiu?
No, I think the lack of resources for certain students is always a concern and will be a concern, and I think it's key for instructors when they're moving things online to provide things in a variety of different formats, some that maybe take lower bandwidth than others, so that students that do have some have some issues there still are able to take part in the learning.
Thank you, Louise. This one also came through live during the discussion. It might be best for you to take the lead on this one, Louise. But how extensive is the random generation of data in Mobius? That was from Greenfield David.
Yeah, no, inside of Mobius, the random generation is very extensive. You have the ability to do simple things in terms of provide different numbers to questions. You can do that with numbers or with words. You have the ability to switch elements so that you can have even groups of things that you're then switching in tandem, so that you can be very specific about what variations you want. As well, Mobius has the ability, you can actually ask it to do very complicated things. So for example, give me a polynomial of degree 4 where all of the coefficients are between -2 and 2. So you can actually build up expressions like that very easily using our random generator.
Thanks, Louise. Cedric?
I was also like adding like in science or both science and biology, you can also randomly generate figure or picture. And that's really helpful, for example, because you can have like a different diagram with different answer, and each like a student will receive a different diagram or like a different part of the diagram to answer. And that's really really useful.
Thanks, Cedric. So here's another one that was sent before we kicked off today. This one is, how can teachers and parents track students' progress online and measure their engagement in online STEM materials? Cedric, did you?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So it was like one of the good things with like Mobius is you can look at what we call like the mark of every student, like how long it took them to do any coursework, what is the most discriminative question, and what is like the question which is like the most wrongly answered, like the best answer. So in terms of like for I would say, teacher, it's very easy to follow, I would say, what the students are doing. In terms of parents, at the university, I'm not sure really like the parents are really involved in the progress of the students.
But I think for schools, I think you can set access rights for parents. I think it shouldn't be like a big problem to be able to access the data for one child, or you can share that. Maybe you can share a report for a specific student with the parent. So.
Thanks, guys. Okay, another one here. This one was sent prior to broadcast today. One thing I'd like to ask more about is how can STEM be taught online to encourage peer collaboration, which can support wider skill development of students, so things like team working skills, problem solving and communication. And how can we know that we are successful in developing these skills?
Ovidiu, do you want to go for this one?
So in our program, we have some modules which involve peer collaboration, but we haven't used Möbius for those.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say like we have also, I think one problem is a lot of students do not like really collaboration work, especially because some students like are more involved than the other, and we receive quite a lot of complaints or say, oh, I did most of the work and this person haven't done anything. It's not fair for me to have like done all the work alone. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes quite difficult to like to handle that as big group. So usually we are doing all this like collaborative work more as a year one and less after that for year 2 and year 3, because like the students really don't like it at all, and that's created a lot of trouble for like marks and like auto assessment.
Yeah, but in terms of platforms, so we have platforms where where students can work, can collaborate online. So, for example, we can set up channels in Teams, private channels for it. So you have each team has a private channel where they can all share work. We are using OneNote. So this is Microsoft OneNote, and there students can also have their own folder. So it's like a group of students has its own folder. We have blogs in a Blackboard. So there are technologies which allow peer collaboration.
Yeah. And I think like if you are doing also teaching, you can using Zoom and just have like the different rooms, and like you can break like your whole cohort in a like subdivision of a room to let the student work for like a specific time and then go back to like present to the rest of the cohort. So yeah, we are using it. I don't say that we are not using it. I just say that it's not like a favorite things for the student.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that I would add there is tools where you can do randomized questions. Then students, when they are working together, instead of just saying the answer is 5 to that question, they actually have to talk about how did they get to the answer. So you're actually getting them to talk about the method of the solution, which is really key, right? And that key to learning, and that's how they really help each other.
Thank you, Louise. One that came through live here from John Grannon. How are you developing accessible audio descriptions for lab sessions? So I'm guessing that's one for you there, Louise, in DigitalEd.
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of things that you can do if you have either videos or you have images, or even if you use the slideshow feature inside of Möbius, you have the ability to add a transcript so that it's there as available for students, and if they're using screen readers, that can work to take them through the video. You can annotate different pieces of the content as well to help with accessibility.
Thanks, Louise. Another one that was sent before we kicked off today, and you guys actually have spoken a little bit about assessment, so this could be a good one. How do we assess formative and summative inquiry-based learning through synchronous and asynchronous lessons? Cedric or Ovidiu?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Nothing on about assessment and inquiry-based learning and how Möbius supports it?
Yeah, it's like I can talk a little bit about that, and then Cedric and Ovidiu probably can add to it. So inside of Mobius, you can have lessons, and right within those lessons, you can ask a question. So the student is reading through the material, they see a question, they can try it multiple times, because again, it can be randomly generated, so that they can try different times, get immediate feedback to see, do they understand the concept or not. And then throughout that lesson, when they do have time to either have a conversation with their fellow students or with their instructors or TAs, they can actually say, okay, well, this particular question I had an issue with, I couldn't get the answer, or I didn't understand how to do that. And so being able to put that directly in the learning path for the students is extremely important. And in terms of summative assessment, Mobius has a variety of assignment types, 5 different assignment types that can be used for straight homework, for quizzes, for exams, things like that.
Thanks, Louise. Did you have anything to add to that, Cedric or Ovidiu?
Yes, I would like to add that there are some very well-made resources in Mobius for problem solving. So the sessions are not just of, so there is a pretty complex teaching material for mathematics. And so there is teaching material, then there are quizzes as well that you can embed in your lectures. And there are also ready-made videos. And yeah, so it's not just an assessment tool.
Thank you. Thanks, Ovidiu. Now, we definitely did mention this earlier on in the webinar, but we've since had 2 more questions about it. So it might be worth just touching on it again, about dealing with practical lab-based sessions. So we had Mike Entwise, who asked, how have the universities dealt with the challenges of practical work? And then another one saying, what alternatives we have to deal with lab sessions where student engagement is a big concern. So Cedric or Ovidiu?
I would say, like in the past, like when, like since the lockdown, we had to cancel like some of the like practical work. For like the coming year, what we will do is like we will repeat with very small groups the practical a lot of time. So we are trying also to integrate more the practical in between different modules. So that's like the way I think we are tackling that in the School of Bioscience. And I was saying also we still have like field trip in small group to allow the student to interact more, like especially for the ecology part.
Thank you.
Yes, at Derby we also had to reduce the number of students in a lab to respect the social distancing. However, in our case, the labs in mathematics, in computer science are more theoretical, so I think it's not as big a problem for us as it is for others. So I'm not working with any substances or something like this, which can only be manipulated within a certain environment. So
thanks, Ovidiu. Probably got time for one last question here. Oh, hang on. We've had one from Amanda for Cedric and Ovidiu. When you say a small group for fieldwork, how many students are you taking at a time?
So I think like for the timing is like 25 to 30. And then after that is also like for more like the practical, it will depend on the size of the room also we have. So because we have like a 2 meter like social distancing in the school, we have to adapt. So we have like a big rooms, which is fine, which can have like 50 students, but some others are like smaller, so we need to adapt that. But I think like for the time being, the field course are 25 to 30.
Thanks, Cedric. So probably time for one more question here, guys. And I'd just like to say, for anyone whose questions haven't been answered, our panelists will find a way to answer your questions post the webinar. But one last question here for Louise. What would be the average lead time to adopt this package and implement it?
Great, that's a great question. And so Mobius, the platform, can be set up very quickly. And I think Ovidiu mentioned them a little bit earlier. We do have these content packs that are available to really help people get started. And so there's in a variety of different mathematical subjects that so that you can adopt those, get started online very, very quickly. And so the lead time is, it can be as early, as soon as sort of a week, and then putting in your content and adapting the content that we have will obviously depend on what courses you're trying to implement. So definitely we can get in touch and we can have a follow-up conversation with anyone who's interested to sort of look at your specific syllabus of what you're looking for, and then give you some specific feedback for your case.
Thanks so much, Louise. So that's sadly just about all we've got time for today. All of us here at EdQuarter would like to thank our expert panel. It was Dr. Cedric Berger, a senior lecturer from Cardiff School of Biosciences. Thank you, Cedric. Dr. Ovidiu Bagdasar, Associate Professor of Maths at Derby University, and Louise Krmpotic, Vice President of Enterprise Services at DigitalEd. And thanks to you, our audience, for joining us. To stay up to date with the latest education news and keep tabs on our exciting webinar schedule, you can visit the EdQuarter platforms on edtechnology.co.uk or universitybusiness.co.uk and ie-today.co.uk. Have a great afternoon, stay safe, and hope to see you all again soon. And thanks again to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.